The situation is extremely volatile.
I can't see it resuming anytime soon.
For both NRL and AFL fans.
A lot of nervous people within cricket ranks.
The negotiations with the banks are still ongoing.
It's catastrophic, the financial crisis
The
like this.
Formula One Grand Prix has been cancelled.
The AFL has just made a big call.
Someone's got to make a hard call.
Postponing the Tokyo Olympic Games.
I really do think that it almost might be starting again.
We may see this
the most serious threat to our game in 100 years.
The NRL restarts this week, and just in time. League couldn't have survived in mothballs much longer.
One thing we've really learned is that sport is living from week to week. What the new chairman of the NRL, Peter V'landys, has done is he's set an ambitious target, but he has overcome every obstacle in his way to make it happen.
It's tough to understand. How can one of the biggest codes in the country be on such a knife's edge? Shoddy management? Well, kind of. Spending all the money in its future fund back in 2017 has almost cost the NRL its future. By some calculations, the league was just weeks away from going under.
No gate taking, sponsorship, membership, merchandise. Some clubs I spoke to said, look, if the competition is halted, we could probably last 8 to 12 weeks.
But it's not as simple as a single Cavalier code. Take the AFL, the richest code in the country, boasting a $120 million plus future fund and a reportedly $1 billion stadium. But even flush with cash and with just 5 rounds shaved off the season, 80% of the at least 5,000 workers at clubs and headquarters have lost their jobs. Many won't get them back.
They were basically spending as much as they were earning. If you look at the exponential growth of their assistant coaches, data analysts, all those people, the guys who've now been laid off, people are going to have to take a haircut.
It's unlikely, for example, you'll see a coach's box this crowded for a long time. See, codes have been maxing out their credit cards for years, safe in the knowledge that ever more lucrative broadcast deals and commercial partnerships are just over the horizon. And why not? A rising tide lifts all boats, right?
When the tide goes down, you find out who's got any clothes on, and a few sports are going to be unfortunately badly exposed.
Lots of clubs and entire codes are splashing money they simply don't have.
I don't think we've ever come across a financial crisis like this.
We may see players' jobs lost.
The game stars were waging war over how much they'll be paid.
The Trio's manager terminated their contracts today.
As a business model, it's irrational, but sport's not a rational business. It's a competition. And if you want to win things, it's the only choice you have. Clubs feel they can't afford not to pay their players and coaches more and more to keep up with the Joneses, because otherwise, the Joneses will win the premiership. That's turned lots of sports into a bubble built on hope and hype, ready to burst once the money stopped rolling in for any reason. And COVID-19 is a hell of a reason. The problem is, it could turn a correction into a wipeout.
There's so much competition in the market, some of the second-tier sports could really fall through the cracks.
Rugby union was already struggling badly. The A-League are in a really perilous situation.
Gate receipts will take a long time to recover, if they ever do. Meanwhile, with empty stands creating a weaker product and the sponsors as cash-strapped as the codes themselves, broadcasting's rivers of gold are already drying up. Even a good result means a more slimmed-down competition in some way. And in a crowded, brutal sporting ecosystem, not everyone will survive.
We need to save some money.
If we don't get that revenue from broadcast, we can't pay the costs.
The clubs have taken an 80% staff cut.
We can't pay any of our bills.
Sports that are international by nature, like the Olympics, tennis and Formula One, are facing untold years of disruption as international travel is compromised. It's hard to see the 1,000-strong Grand Prix circus being cleared to descend on Melbourne by March, and just how many of the world's best and their international fans will be able to make the Aussie Open in January. No one honestly knows what they'll look like after all that damage, but some will be unrecognisable. And that is already true for rugby. With a domestic comp spanning 5 countries and a pay TV-only broadcast deal, Super Rugby could scarcely be more vulnerable, and there are real fears for the game's future.
Super Rugby in its current format is dead. They have no broadcast rights deal for 2021. They have no product to sell. They have sacrificed rivalries and matchups that rugby fans want to see for sponsorship dollars, strategic partnerships.
Cricket should be okay. It's kind of socially distanced and usually involves only one visiting team that can be quarantined relatively easily. And when India plays, about 1 billion people watch. That means Indian money will keep it alive, but that comes with potentially game-changing strings attached.
Australia are still really confident that they'll get at least a 4-test series against India this year, which is going to be worth $300 million to them. But then the trade-off might be having the IPL, which makes $800 million in India. Having such a strong financial dependence on India raises a few questions. Do we allow our first-class players to miss the Sheffield Shield to play in the IPL, which will diminish their preparation for a test series against India?
And then there's women's sport.
Taylor Harris with that very familiar finish.
Magical moment in Australian sport.
Check to the corner.
This meteoric rise may be the most inspiring sporting story of the last decade. But in growth sports like cricket and our footy codes, it was made possible in part by the financial and institutional firepower of the men's games. What happens when those games lose money and when bodies like the AFL start looking for savings? What if they decide their investment in the women's game is unsustainable? That would be a disaster. But fortunately, there's a very good business case for keeping women's sport going, even when it isn't yet making money.
Women's football, junior football, that's where your growth comes from, your participation, your future fans, they're the future of your game. So those sports who make a short-term cut in their development areas, I think they're going to be long-term losers.
And for fans and players of all codes and clubs, big and small, this crisis could weaken our bonds with the games we love.
We play games without the fans? No, it's impossible.
That is incredible viewing right there. Let's have a listen.
Without much-loved matchday rituals, with socially distant celebrations and canned applause, it just won't be the same.
We all knew the fans were incredibly important to sport, but now we know beyond any doubt the fans are actually everything.
So what if the end result is a less hyper-professional game with lower salaries and fewer coaches? Maybe in the circumstances, that's okay. Maybe that's just sport as it used to be, when the dollars were smaller, but we loved it just as much.
I don't necessarily think it would be a bad thing if sport pared it back a bit and we saw talented players play with their instinct.
We might even remember what made us fall for sport in the first place.
Sport is a couple of kids with a bat and ball or a couple of kids kicking a ball around a park. There's always going to be sport. We might just have to reimagine a little bit how that occurs, even at the top levels, right down to the community levels.
Because if you take away the commerce, the brand synergies, the strategic partnerships and the used chewing gum endorsements, you still have the game itself. You still have the thrill of being part of something bigger than yourself. The fairy tale victory against all odds, the thrill of seeing the limits of human possibility met, then exceeded, then smashed. And yeah, these are all massive cliches, but at its best, sport can make you believe them.
I've never seen anything like that anywhere.
What a moment, what a game.
Sport will endure. Too many of us just love it too much to let it slip away.
I mean, that's a really good point. The last point you just made, like, it'll get through. But geez, watching it, you just remember how weird the situation is.
Yeah.
Like this, it comes back to you sometimes.
Yeah.
You kind of, we've all adapted quite quickly, and then it just goes, oh, that's right.
Yeah.
There's empty stadiums, and there's sports about to go under, maybe.
Looking forward to footy coming back, but then you go, oh, that's.
Yeah.
I saw one of the soccer players in Germany celebrate on his own, and none of the other players were allowed to go near him, and it was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. It really was.